Hello, my name's Vanessa Bellally, CEO of We Are Tech Women, and welcome to my lounge. Today, I have the pleasure of talking to the wonderful Greig McEwan, who's the CTO over at Funding Circle. We're going to talk about Greig's career, mentorship, allyship, the diversity within teams, and share some top tips for those of you who aspire to leadership positions. So first of all, Greig, welcome to my lounge.
Hi, Vanessa. Thanks for inviting me along. Great to be here. Lovely to meet you. I'm looking forward to our chat today.
Me too. So first of all, I mean, obviously I've read up a little bit about you and your background, but tell me where life began. So where did you grow up? Where did you study?
Yeah, so as you can maybe tell from my accent, I was born and raised in Scotland in a really nice seaside town called Ayr, which some people may have heard of. If you know golf, it's nestled in between Troon and Turnberry, so that's where it is in Scotland. Yeah, I had a great childhood there, a lovely place to grow up, really nice part of the world. I then went off to university once I completed school. I didn't go that far. I went to Glasgow, which is about an hour along the road. Went to Glasgow University and stayed in the centre of Glasgow for 3 or 4 years. Had a great time, really enjoyed it. I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do career-wise, and so I chose a degree which gave a broad range of subjects. So it was a social sciences degree that I did, so covering, as I say, a range of things like politics, economics, sociology, psychology, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Really enjoyed it, and I think it gave me a good basis for what I do today.
So what was the first job? So you come out of uni, you've gone to university, you come out there, and you, to your point, right, it's such a big question, isn't it? And I do a lot of talks in schools with youngsters, and they think that they should have the answer. Well, right, I've done the degree, I now know what I'm going to do, but I know people who are my age are still trying to work out what they're going to do. So tell me, what was the first move?
I just I initially took on some temporary work. Actually, I thought the most important thing was to be involved and start exploring what you might like to do. So I worked in financial services to begin with. For the Halifax, doing like underwriting for mortgage applications. And then I was lucky enough, and this is where the kind of technology angle comes in. I was then lucky enough just through network to be taken on as a trainee programmer, and that was there was no expectation of having any prior experience or knowledge. Could you demonstrate that you had some kind of level of commitment and intelligence to be able to try? And so very lucky. I was taken on as a trainee, and the whole idea was that they would invest in me and invest in helping me develop my skills in programming and other tech skills. So I was very, very lucky in that sense.
What language was it, out of curiosity?
Oh, it was a long time ago. It was so a bit of SQL, which obviously is a big thing today still. But then there was some very old Oracle technologies in there as well. So it's gone back quite early.
So I was Visual Basic. I mean, that was obviously back in the day. The fact that I could knock up a little databases, I thought was excellent. Yeah. So where do you go from there? So obviously you've gone up the development routes. You've gone into more of a technical route. Talk me through the jumps to kind of where you are today.
Yeah, so you're right. I started down the technical route, but after a short period of time, I got a better sense of how technology as a function operates and the different kind of departments and capabilities that existed, and I felt actually that maybe my skill sets were better suited to more the delivery side, so programming, project management, and so. Again, with the support of my employer at the time, we decided to pivot somewhat, and then I did go down the more of a delivery route rather than the individual technical contributor route. Yeah. And I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed that, and what I liked about it was you're bringing together different teams of people, different capabilities, different skill sets in order to try and strive towards an outcome. And it was that tangible outcome that I really enjoyed working towards, and working with all the different people. So I went down that route, and then really what happened was you start to take on bigger, more important, more strategic initiatives, don't you? You then get a really good understanding of how you can make a technology function collectively work towards achieving something, as I said. And so then I went into more management type roles, and then ultimately that grew to, you know, leading a function of program and project managers, again, all within technology, and kind of leading the development teams there as well. Then all the way through to that becoming technology director. And then now in my third CTO role, unbelievably. So again, you know, if you think back to, you know, being at university, not really knowing what I wanted to do, having a broad, you know, base of subjects, and then becoming CTO was not the most obvious path, I have to say.
No, definitely not. Did you ever worry? Because like sometimes I talk to people that have taken that technical path, and you talked about being an individual contributor. And I remember moving from a role where I was very much in my role, doing what I was doing, to actually leading teams. And I found that really difficult to do because I was out of control of the delivery if it was me. And all of a sudden I was very reliant on other people. So there's kind of two questions there. So first of all, did you ever worry about leaving your technical role to go into a more leadership role? But also, once you kind of got into that leadership role, did you ever question your value? Because obviously, you and I both know that involves a lot of thinking, more strategic planning. It tends to take time. So there's nothing tangible at the end of every single day.
Yeah.
Did you ever struggle there?
Yeah, no, great questions. I on the first point about leaving the technical role, it's always quite a big decision. So I did give it a lot of thought. But it's fairly obvious to me that the direction I was taking was, I think, just much more aligned to my skill set. I don't think that ultimately being an individual contributor was going to be fulfilling enough for me personally. I much preferred that the kind of management leadership and that collaboration. So I think it was obvious, but you know, I guess the challenge is you still have to, you know, maintain a level of technical understanding to be a credible technology leader. So you have to make sure that you do that for sure. And then in terms of impact, well, what I found was that in the organizations that I had worked in, and these were always internal technology functions within a commercial business, right? And what I noticed was, it's less so these days, but there was a definite gap, right, between what technology was doing and trying to achieve, and what the business understood it was doing and trying to achieve, and how technology would support the business. And so I found I was quite effective operating in that space, being that link between tying together what the organization is trying to achieve, and therefore what that means from a technology perspective. And that's how I found, you know, I was able to make that impact that you were talking about. You're right, it takes a bit longer. But you know, I felt that was a space that I was able to operate quite effectively in. Yeah.
And there is always this kind of, you know, this underlying different visions between what the business want and feeling they're being done to by technology, and what technology are trying to do in terms of, you know, seeing the bigger picture, knowing that this is going to make the business's life easier, and feeling like they're banging their head against a brick wall. So I totally get it. So having those people in the middle, almost the brokers between the two, and making sure that everything is at peace so you can actually get the delivery done, is such an important role. And it's actually a really interesting role as well. So tell me, so you're a CTO. And obviously, you know, there's a lot of kind of our listeners out there and ladies that are watching from our community that aspire to the C-suite role. And as we both know, there are many different C-suites, from CIO, you know, CEO and CTO in the technology space. Explain to me from a day-to-day perspective what a CTO does.
Yeah, it's a great question. I get asked that quite a lot as well. What do you actually do?
What do you actually do?
I think it boils down to two things for me. Two things. As a CTO, and this is especially true at Funding Circle, fundamentally my role is to ensure that what we do in technology is enabling the business to achieve its outcomes. I mean, Funding Circle is a digital business after all, right? So you can imagine that, you know, it is driven by technology, and therefore has a critical role to play in that. So I need to have a strategy in place that illustrates and demonstrates how we are going to support the business strategy ultimately. And then that distills down into execution. So what does that actually mean? So you've got a strategy, which is obviously your direction of travel, but then that's got to translate into you know, specific delivery, specific improvements, specific changes we're going to make in order to drive towards those outcomes. And the second thing is, you know, I have the pleasure of leading the team who actually do that. You know, I sit in my position, but you know, at Funding Circle, there's around 350 people in the team there in tech, and they're the ones who actually make it happen. And I see myself as my role in that as a leader is to enable them to be able to do that, essentially, whatever the role might be, whether it be a technical role or a non-technical role. My job is to pave the way for them to be able to deliver against the strategy that supports the business strategy overall. So that's what I would describe my role as being.
Perfect description. So in terms of strategy, because sometimes as you move out of more technical roles, or whether you're PMO, project manager, program manager, and you move into more strategic roles, which is where we start to take on kind of more senior positions, sometimes that word strategy can petrify people, the fact that they would have to write a strategy. I mean, just where do you start with the strategy? Because obviously it doesn't all come out of your heads. Is there a series of meetings, a series of engagements? How do you pull that strategy together?
First thing, and this should always be the starting point, is the business strategy. And having a really good, clear understanding of what that is fundamental, right? Because if you don't have that, then you're going to struggle to understand how you can support it. And this is something that I've noticed at my short time at Funding Circle, is the strategy is very, very clear and very well understood. So that's the starting point. And then what you need to do is, through conversations with other key stakeholders in the business, whether it be other C-suite members or other stakeholders across the business, to understand what does that mean to them, right? And break it down a little bit. So make it into more, I suppose, more tangible. What does that mean to you in reality on a day-to-day basis? What does it mean between now and next year, or the end of this year and the next year? Really trying to break it down. And then through that information, then you can start to piece together, what does that mean from a technology perspective? What does that mean we need to do? And I always look at it through three lenses. One is the technology itself, obviously. So how do we, what are the actual pieces of technology that we need in order to be able to support the strategy? Then it's also people. So what kind of skill sets, what kind of capabilities do we need to have in order to be able to execute? And then the third thing, which holds it all together, is operating model or ways of working out. What is the most effective way for us to be able to work, bringing together the technology, tying together the stakeholder needs and the strategy, so that we can deliver on it effectively. So if you combine people, operating model, and the technology, that's how I tend to structure a strategy. You've got to have answers for all those three areas, in my view.
Yeah, fantastic way of describing it. It's like some people are fearful of it, but breaking it down into those component parts, I think, is really easy. So it is the tools, how we're going to use them, and obviously you've got the people in there as well.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
Let's talk about running teams. It's clearly something that you enjoy. So how important to you is the diversity of your team?
Yeah, I mean, it's massively important. I think the benefits of having a diverse and inclusive team are almost endless, actually, right? I think you obviously benefit from a wider range of perspectives and ideas and experiences, which can just makes, I think, for a much more enriched working environment for everyone, which can only be a good thing. I think diversity helps to create a culture where people can be themselves. And I think when you're comfortable with being yourself, then that means you perform better, and that means ultimately it leads to better outcomes and better results and just a better experience for everybody. I think it leads to better problem solving, more creativity, as I mentioned. And ultimately, I think it can drive engagement. And I think we all know the benefits of engagement as it relates to productivity and delivering outcomes. So, I mean, I think it's an essential. It's essential. It's not a choice. It's essential, I think, to drive diversity and inclusion in your team. If you're not doing that, then you're missing out on all the things that I've just described, which just doesn't make sense to me. Yeah. Yeah.
So how do we foster inclusion? Because especially when you get to a certain point and your teams get bigger and people get buried in the layers of those teams, how do we make sure that everyone feels included? What does that look like?
I mean, for me, what it means is that, certainly as someone in a leadership position, I have to make it clear that addressing diversity and inclusion is an explicit priority. I think it's got to be, very explicit to people that it's important and why, as I've just described all the reasons why I think it's important. So I think that's the starting point, because if you're not talking about inclusion and diversity, and you're not surfacing the challenges that we all know exist, if you're not having an open dialogue and debate about it, then you're actually not going to succeed. You're not going to make a difference. So I think that's really important. And more specifically, some of the things that we are doing at Funding Circle directly aligned to this is we've got an amazing program of what we call circular groups, which are, as the name suggests, groups of circles. We call ourselves circles. That's the employees call us. Who form a group to promote diversity and inclusion across a whole spectrum of topics. I mean, the obvious ones, I guess, gender, LGBTQ, race, but also a more recent one, for example, is neurodiversity. Yeah. So there's loads of different flavors of diversity and inclusion, and what we're trying to do at Funding Circle is create that environment where we're having these conversations that people can get involved in a way that they want to on those topics that are dear to them, and we're just shining a light on it. And I think if we talk about gender diversity in particular, we've got some other programs that we do as well. So we talked about mentoring. We've got mentoring schemes in place. We've got reverse mentoring as well, which I think's a really interesting approach too. We've got female empowerment programs, which we ran last year. We'll do the same this year. So there's a lot that we're doing, but as always, there's always more, and so we're always striving to what other things could we be doing, as you say, in order to foster it within the team.
So there's two things on that. So firstly, on the mentoring side, just before we go on to talk about kind of allyship and the gender side of things, did you benefit from mentors? Do you think they're a fundamental part of your kind of career journey or your success?
Yeah. So I was never part of a formal mentorship program as a mentee through my career. But what I did benefit from was, and these people, well, I'm not going to name them. I'm going to, I won't embarrass them, but there are probably three leaders who I've worked for in the past who absolutely had a massive role to play in my development and my career progression. As I say, it wasn't explicitly through mentorship, but they, if you like, took me under their wing and provided me with opportunities to progress. They backed me fundamentally. That was what they did. They backed me. They gave me the opportunities. I hope I didn't let them down. I'm sure I did from time to time, but I think when you get those opportunities, you've got to reciprocate and actually deliver against them. So in a way, that was mentorship, right? It might not have been through a formal program, but that was definitely a massive.
It's actually sponsorship that we'd kind of
more like sponsorship, yeah.
Someone giving you. I remember one of my bosses talking about giving me air cover. Like, I will cover you, while you put your ideas together, and articulate them, and I will back you in that room, where the influencers kind of were. But also in opening up doors of opportunity. And it's funny because a lot of people I talk to, there's always three. There's something
really
strange. There's always, I've got three too. There's always three. But that's really, really important, isn't it? And again, we're going to come on to gender in a sec, but how do you pay that forward? Is that always kind of in your mind that these doors were open for you? How do you kind of do that to other people?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can't overestimate the effect that had on me being able to do the jobs that I do today. It literally wouldn't have happened without them, and so absolutely that's at the forefront of my mind. And again, I think it's part of my responsibility as a leader to pay it on, as you say. And there are lots of different ways you can do that, obviously. So yeah, I think it's incredibly important. And it can really make a difference. That's my experience. It genuinely makes a difference. So I think you've got a responsibility as a leader to do that for sure.
And that kind of leads me quite nicely into kind of allyship. So in particular in gender, I mean, depending on what report you read, right? But there are currently 21% of women in the tech space. We're not making it through to like the mid-level. We did a whole piece around research around the barriers that exist, unclear pathways for progression, lack of role models, lack of sponsorship and mentorship and stuff. And we covered all that last year. How do you kind of demonstrate that allies, perhaps not even just for women, but for marginalized groups, because one of the things, again, International Women's Day this year, we're talking about equity. So equity over than equality, because it's pointless giving you and I the same set of tools because I'm on the back foot because of my gender. So how do we demonstrate that allyship that leads to kind of, more equity in the game for people that are perhaps not at the same starting point?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think, again, for me, the starting point is again, somebody in the position that I'm in, you have to be a public advocate of the diversity and inclusion and the benefits that it brings. You need to be vocal about it. That needs to be out there. People need to know that that's important for you, and it's a priority for you. And I think the way that you achieve that is not just saying it, obviously, but actually the actions that you take on a day-to-day basis. And it's those visible signals and behaviors that others will see and pick up on in the everyday. That's what promotes it, really. So you're in other words, I guess you're setting you're trying to set an example of how to make a difference and the importance of making the difference as well. And I think what that means basically is just really taking every opportunity you can to elevate, whether it be, as you say, females in the organization or other marginalized groups, taking whatever opportunity you can to visibly and publicly elevate them within the organization, whether it's celebrating successes or there's so many things you can do day to day. I think that's just really key.
And I think what you said earlier on about having those kind of circles, having leadership attend them so that they can hear the lived experiences of some of these individuals. The greatest thing a leader can do is to listen.
Yeah.
And as you say, and not just talk a good game, but actually live it in your everyday actions. And it becomes to a point where it's not even conscious. It's just part of kind of who you are as a leader.
Agreed. And then hopefully that then extends out to the team as well, and it becomes behavior, and that it just becomes part of the culture. Actually, is what you're really trying to achieve. That's what you're trying to achieve ultimately.
And that's so important, isn't it? Again, it's that learned experience, like watching those behaviors and thinking, this is how I kind of step up. And if that's it going on every single day, it becomes part of the culture. And obviously we all aspire to a great culture and a great inclusive work environment.
Agreed.
So a couple of questions before we finish off. Think back on your career. No doubt you were given pieces of advice that you can reflect on now and think, that was sound. That was, the absolute thing that's propelled me forward. If you had to pass on those pieces of advice, and maybe it's something that you've learned rather than something that you was given, give me 3 kind of short top tips that you would like to give to someone that perhaps aspires to a bigger role or is kind of, feeling a little bit demotivated in their tech careers. What would they be?
Yeah, what a great question. Do you know what? I think it's actually 3 very, very straightforward things. And I think these apply almost regardless of what particular career path you've taken or domain you happen to be in. First thing for me that served me really well, and again, it was advice I was given early on, which was actually always do what you said you were going to do. And I said, it's so basic. But that builds credibility, right? And credibility goes a huge distance. It goes a long, long way. And if you can consistently do that, then and you can maintain that credibility, then that is a great platform. I think the other thing I would say is be transparent as well. When I first joined Funding Circle, I stood up in front of the team and shared some of the things that were most important to me as an individual and professionally, and transparency was one of those things. And transparency can take lots of different forms, obviously, but ultimately what it's about is building trust and integrity.
Yeah.
So you add that onto credibility and trust and integrity, then you're getting somewhere, I think. And then finally, what I would say is always be open to new ideas, and wherever they come from. Create an environment where new ideas are encouraged from all over the team, and be open to them, because you will never know everything, and there are some great ideas out there, and there's always an opportunity to learn. So those are the 3 things that I would advise.
And to me, that's the perfect recipe for leadership, right? Because we all want to work for someone that wants to listen to our ideas and kind of move them forward. Someone who's authentic, and honest and transparent. That's all I think that's what everyone wants from a boss, to know where we kind of stand and what we need to do.
I think so, yeah. I think so.
But also that first piece around kind of, again, just being that, showing that leadership, I think is really, really important, because kind of people can pick up on that.
Yeah.
So last question. What's next for Greig? Obviously, you're new in role, just getting into things, getting your teeth into kind of your strategy and stuff like that. But what's kind of coming up this year? What's exciting you?
Yeah, I mean, so it'll be a big year. I've been with Funding Circle now for 3 months, and so obviously 2023 is going to be a big year for us, as a lot to do. I mean, but I guess because I'm at the early stages, I'm just absolutely 100% focused on how can we best collectively as a team leverage the technology capabilities we've got in order to help Funding Circle deliver against its strategy, which we talked about earlier. And so that strategic work that we talked about is definitely something I'm doing now. People, process, and the tech itself is where we're at right now. It's challenging circumstances, as everybody knows, and the broader environment makes that a bit more difficult. And so there's I guess the need for all of us to be doing extra in order to make sure that we succeed. And for me, there's a huge amount of potential in Funding Circle. That's clear already. It was clear actually from even earlier when I first joined. And I just want to make sure that we as a team can realize that potential. And so I've called out a couple of kind of headline objectives for us as a team this year, which is to create a highly engaged team, and we've got ways of measuring that, and a more gender diverse team as well. So I've actually called that out as a specific target this year. And I know targets can, be people with different views on that. And for me, it's, it's necessary. Well, it's necessary, right? I mean, at the moment it is necessary, and if it's going to move the dial, then we should do it. We shouldn't have to be in a position where we have to do that, but currently we are, so I have no problem with it. So yeah, an exciting year ahead. There'll be a lot of change, I think, but for the good. Yeah, and I'm already enjoying it.
Fantastic. And I agree with you totally. What doesn't get measured doesn't get done. So whether it's targets, a framework or whatever, putting it out there kind of sets the scene and sets the intention. Yeah. So Greg, it's been wonderful to talk to you. For those of you who are looking for roles, you can go to Funding Circle's website. I mean, who wouldn't want to work for Greg? Keep considering it myself. There's lots of different roles out there, so please do go and have a look. And again, for you small business owners, Funding Circle's business is providing loans for small businesses. They're very competitive, so do go and have a look at the website. But Greg, it just leaves me to say thank you very, very much for joining me. I'm looking forward to getting to know you over the course of the year. And again, a big thank you to Funding Circle for always supporting us in our work as well. So thank you very much.
My pleasure.